we go. Perfect. Okay, so hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our first preschool virtual open house with the amazing Robert Lince Early Learning Center. The intention of this virtual open house visit is to offer an opportunity for schools and communities to learn more about inclusionary practices by providing access to our actual demonstration sites, preschool partners. And the open house is open forum. And if you have any question, please use the chat or feel free to speak out. Also, just so everyone knows that the visit will be recorded. So as we go through the open house, please keep this etiquette in mind. We encourage a growth mindset where you're open to thinking about new ideas and willing to push yourself to grow. And once again, we'd like to thank you guys for joining us. We're really excited to be doing this work, and thank you for being present, positive, and engaged. If you have more information, if you need more information about the IPP demonstration sites, which is who Cassie and I represent, please feel free to utilize our website, which is there for the clicking. Also, if you need more information for Robert Lince, their website is also available there too. We can also place them in the chat for you if you want to access them sooner. So we would like to introduce ourselves and as well as the Robert Lince team. And we also would like to get to know you. So Cassie and I are going to introduce ourselves, and then we'll move on to the team and then the people that are participating today. So my name is Monique Worthy. I am an inclusion specialist with the UW Parent Center. I'm also working on the IPP demo sites project. I've been a little bit of everything from a coach to a TA to a lead teacher, and now I am working with UW's inclusion specialist, and I'm very happy to be here. Cassie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, you bet. Hello, my name is Cassie Borges. I'm an inclusion specialist, board certified behavior analyst, and lead of the preschool demo sites project. I also am a jack of all trades. I've been in preschool. I've been involved in clinical settings for a BCBA. But this project has been my most favorite thing in the entire world. To disseminate inclusionary practices across the state of Washington is fantastic. And I cannot wait for everybody to get to know our team at Robert Lince. So Stephanie, I'll pass it off to you. Maybe you can go next.
Hey everybody, I'm Stephanie Andler. I'm a Director of State and Federal Programs here in Sela School District, and I'm so excited to be with you all today. I'm going to pass it off to my amazing colleague, Betty.
Hi everyone, my name is Betty Lopez. I'm the Special Education Director for the Sela School District, and I work closely with our team over at Lince, thinking about how we braid together all the different types of programming in our inclusive preschool. So I will pass it on to Missy.
Hi everybody, I'm Missy Jackson. I am an ECAP classroom teacher as well as a special education coach, and this is here in Sela, sorry about that. And this particular topic is my kind of my life interest. So it's my passion just to be a part of this and to see this starting to happen in our classrooms. This is amazing. So I'm super excited to share it with everybody. And let's see, who's next? Is it no, Monique, you introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Next.
Okay. You can pass it back to me. That is totally fine. We're here. So we would also like to open the floor for others to introduce themselves. You can introduce yourselves from the chat. You can call it out. I would prefer you to call it out because I love to hear people. Even if you don't want to be seen, I would love to know who you are. We would love to know your name, your school and location, and your topic of interest today. Thank you, Erica, for being here.
And I'm Catherine Schultz. I work for East Valley School District in Spokane. I am the developmental preschool teacher in conjunction with the ECAP.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. And what was the topic of interest for you today?
You know, I'm not sure. I just want to learn more about inclusion because we're trying to do it. The ECAP teacher and I kind of on our own, but just get more ideas to make it more successful.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
I want to say hi and a special hi to my friend Missy Jackson. I'm so happy to see you here. We miss you so much in Lake Washington. I'm Jody Jens. I'm the program specialist with the preschool in the Lake Washington School District. And really my interest is just learning how other places are doing inclusion and how it's going. And Sela, you have one of my favorite teachers ever. She's wonderful.
That's awesome. She is wonderful. I agree. Okay, Erica is from Alderwood Early Childhood Schools in Edmond and special education. And her topic of interest is moving our self-contained program to a full inclusive program. Thank you for sharing that, Erica. Hi, Kathy. Thank you for being here. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but Kara is from Freeman Auburn Public Schools, preschool to kindergarten transition, and it is a specialist and wants to learn more about inclusion as well. Kathy is from ESD 105 and would like to know more about inclusionary projects, I believe, IPP and pre-K champs. Nice. Awesome.
Hi, I'm Jerry. My name is Jerry Marcus. I'm a school psychologist from Longview School District. Our preschool is called Broadway. And because I'm a school psychologist in lots of levels, my area of interest right now is preschool and inclusion and transition to kindergarten. So just trying to pick up as much as I can.
Awesome. Thank you, Jerry, for sharing that. I appreciate it. I hope you all, I'm being more intentional about my language, I hope you all get the information that you need. Robert Lince is an amazing example of a journey to inclusion. I've had the honor of working with them for this long period of time, and they have been amazing all the way through and through. And I am so happy that they are the first to kick us off and tell you all about the amazing inclusionary practices that they've implemented in their program. So one of the ways that Robert Lince have been very inclusive is their unique way of braiding their funding together to make sure that they do that and that they're inclusive and that they're addressing the needs of all their students. So Betty, I would love for you to talk about how you braided your funding, but before we go deeper into that, I would love for you all to touch bases on your journey to inclusion, because that is why everyone is here. It seems like everybody wants to learn about inclusion, and you guys have gone on your own unique journey. So I would love if you guys would talk about your inclusive journey.
So I'll start, and Stephanie, chime in at any point. Missy, you too. So we, I'd say that the three of us have really been working together in this planning of kind of looking at how we're doing the inclusive classrooms together as a group in the last 3 years. Prior to us, the previous director at the preschool had already been starting this work, and there's been several different iterations of what the blended classrooms have looked like. So this is not something new, we're just kind of refining things. And so the previous way that we braided the program funds was thinking strictly about where special education students could have opportunities with peers. So not as a whole program or campus, but just for those particular classrooms. So those were blended either with tuition or ECAP slots, and still kind of isolated, right? They were special education classrooms with those other peers in those classrooms. So what we did was kind of, because what was getting confusing was families don't understand our different funding sources. And so when we were talking about enrollment to our preschool, it always felt a little disjointed to be like, well, are you applying for an ECAP spot? Or are you applying for a tuition spot? Or do you have a SPED spot? And so we thought, let's streamline it for families and also for the experience for students. And so we have dedicated spots for each one of our classrooms that come from the different funding sources. So the family experience is that of registration registering for preschool, and they may or may not have a cost associated with it depending on which funding source, but it is a preschool classroom. So each one of our classrooms has a combination of ECAP, tuition, and special education. And so we also offer, or try to offer, a continuum of supports for our students who do qualify for special education services, in that they are first considered for our full day classrooms. But if their needs are intensive enough, or they're a brand new baby 3, coming into program, we start them in a half day program, because we just know that that's where their instructional needs are best served. And so that's kind of the big picture of our program. Stephanie or Missy, anything you'd want to add there? Okay. In terms of the mechanics of the funding, we keep very clearly which students are using which funding source. And so Stephanie has created this very lovely color-coded spreadsheet that I think is in one of the resources for our demonstration site work earlier, that you can look at to help us keep track of, is this student in an ECAP slot, or are they in a special ed slot, or are they in a tuition spot, so that when we are audited, to be frank, we can be clear about how we're funding that experience. But functionally, the kids are all in a room together, and we help instruct them through the environment to whatever their needs are. So the specially designed instruction is incorporated within the experience of the preschool classroom. And we use the ECAP requirements as our base because they're the most restrictive. So if there are ECAP requirements in terms of the instructional pieces, then those happen, and we try to figure out how we can weave in specially designed instruction to happen within that. So an example would be centers, right? There's a certain amount of time that kids have to have in free play, but there's no rule to say that that free play can't be directed towards what things kids need to experience. And so manipulating what's available in those play areas is the way that we direct that experience to be a play-based, specially designed instruction opportunity, if that makes sense. There other questions? Do we want to just kind of popcorn out other questions, or maybe as people think of them? I'm trying to monitor the chat as well.
Right. Feel free, if you have a question about anything, to chime in. It's an open forum. You're allowed to speak the first thing that comes to your mind.
So how do you deal with the kids that are on like a social behavior IEP?
Yeah. Well, first of all, being around peers is essential for helping them have models for other behavioral choices, right? And so what we know is that even though there's a need for direct instruction on some of those social skills, if I don't have opportunities around my friends that know how to already do these things, it takes a lot longer for that skill to generalize. So it is about finding ways to do that coaching in the moment for the students, and then also doing specific targeted instruction. And I know Missy and I were just in a group meeting a couple days, well, maybe was it this week? I don't know, I'm losing track of time, about social emotional supports. And we were talking about how this year has limited our ability to use our sunshine circles. And that was really a good way of having that direct instruction across all of our kiddos to some of those social emotional factors. So Missy, this might be a good place for you to answer as well.
Well, I think, what it really comes down to is the intentionality in your planning. And we really, this year, have really adopted the universal design for learning. And that's really guided how we're supporting our teachers in setting their classrooms, their materials, thinking about their lesson plans in a different way, thinking about how they're presenting their classroom to the students that they have, not the students they wish they had, not the model students, but the students that are awesome and wonderful and sitting right in front of them. And so, and sometimes those, you had asked about behaviors, Catherine, and, sometimes those really can be targeted best with the idea of flexibility. And we have to be flexible with our students. We have to be flexible with their capabilities and their capacity to kind of to do what it is we're asking them to do. So so I think, you know, all to say, it really comes down to how are we, like Betty said, how are we structuring our teaching, structuring those experiences? How are we accommodating for, you know, certain communication skills or deficits? Yeah, and you know, sometimes it busts out. Sometimes it doesn't go well, right? And we learn from that, and we make changes, reflect, and try again the next day. So it's always something new, for sure.
I'll give you two concrete examples of this. So one, we've been using zoning maps to help us be really clear about who's doing what with whom throughout the day, so that we're using our paraeducators in an intentional way to move along some of those instructional targets, because social emotional learning in particular is really throughout the day and not always like, I'm going to catch it at this time, right? It's going to ebb and flow from day to day. And so if we think about, while you're in the classroom, I want you to really be coaching this student in this way to help support their independence. That has helped us know who's on deck to kind of be point for our different kids with those specific concerns. So that's one thing, and that's in our artifacts. And then sometimes it's thinking about what are the ways that help the adults really, like Missy was saying, see what is going well, what are the positives, and how do we champion that? And, you know, with COVID, people being kind of at that 99% already, and they're like, I just can't do it. They keep running out of the room. Okay, let's, for right now, let's put up a baby gate because it's going to slow them down, right? And let's like regroup and think about this. So sometimes it's like, what's in front of us to help us take that breath, think about what's going on, and step back from what is it that we're trying to accomplish here. We're not going to get to letters today. They're not going to do centers. And we're going to just really focus on that emotion regulation and staying in the room. Like, yay, we made it.
So, are there times though when, because I'm thinking of, I've got several kids with autism, and so sometimes the room gets too noisy, too busy. So is there like another like room or something where they can go and kind of like decompress and get themselves back? Okay.
Yeah, so sorry, I hope you don't mind if I speak up about this, but so this year I wrote, we applied for a grant for our preschool program and for the kindergarten as well, for a sensory motor room. And so in that, did a lot of research around what kind of equipment needs to be in there for those particular times, for those students that need those sensory experiences to get them to their optimal learning place. And so it's been so exciting, because one of the ways that our preschool program has used it is that we have a couple classrooms who, you know, just by happenstance and just by the, like Betty was saying, the ebb and flow of things, having all, you know, 15, 18 kids together is not the best learning environment, right? And so the way that we've used it is the teachers will split the classrooms in half. And while one classroom goes to the sensory room and kind of works out all that good stuff, the other class stays in for more of the instructional piece and the small groups and things, and then they swap through. So it's been, I mean, we were so lucky to get that. It's been great. And, you know, hopefully we're going to add to it and make it even more of a calming experience. Right now, I feel like the kids sometimes they are purposefully playing in there, but yeah, to just kind of to have that moment. And then there's some students that use it on an individual basis. You know, I've got a student who is multi-sensory impaired, and so sometimes he just needs like the low light, you know, low, slow, sort of smooth movement, that kind of thing. And so one of our paras will take him there and just let him have his chill time. and then he comes back and he's ready to roll. So it's pretty awesome.
And one of the ways that we squeeze in other things too, because just when we're taking those sensory breaks, how can we also still be thinking about instructional needs, right? Because we're always trying to maximize our time. Our SLP has been working on using that time in that space to work on functional communication with students. And, you know, there's a lot of high interest activities in there. And so while they're working on addressing their sensory needs, she's also getting that communication out of them. So that's been another way to kind of multitask, right? So that we're still, because those communication skills are often the breakdown for the social emotional piece or the learning piece, right? And so how do we do double duty in places where we can? There was something else I was going to say about, one of our other teachers highlighted this morning, and I just want to offer it as another way of kind of chunking out the experience, is thinking about station rotations, even for some of your more traditionally whole group activities. So when you have blended classrooms, if you have kids that are getting overstimulated pretty easily, having, you know, your center or carpet time, let's say, actually be with a smaller group while the other groups are working on different stations in the classroom. So that's a kind of non-traditional way of thinking about, you know, your morning circle. Like usually you do that as your whole class. That would be kind of an ECAP recommendation. But we found that, especially this year, needing to chunk that apart has also helped with that sensory and behavioral component.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. That was a ton of information. I love it. Does anybody have any other questions that they want, anything that might have been triggered by to have a question about? I feel like Robert Lince is our content experts on this. At this point, we can always grow to be better, but they are doing amazing work.
While you all are thinking of your questions, I'll just point out one thing that we're wrestling with, just so that you don't think that we have it all figured out. ECAP and preschool, their funding ratio allows for more people, right? So we end up having a lot more paraeducators at our preschool level than we do kindergarten, just by nature of the way that it's funded and the requirements for keeping a 1-to-10 ratio. And so one of the places where we've been really wrestling with all year in smoothing out that transition to K is how are we using those instructional support people to foster independence, because it's a bit of a cliff when they go from the amount of staff in preschool to kindergarten, right? And so if we're not intentional about how we're using people to cue skills, but fostering independence, then we have kiddos that move on to kindergarten that can do the skills as long as there's an adult there, right? And then we get the ask of, can I have an adult because I need this student to be here. So we're wrestling with how do we get everyone on the same page of delivering that support in a way that fosters independence. And so I was actually just before this meeting having a conversation with our behavior specialist, Christy, about, hey, maybe we do some side-by-side coaching and modeling of that, and doing some, like, you know, bug in the ear, like, okay, I see you with that kid, now move over here and talk about, you know, attention this way, to help reinforce that, because that seems to be a hiccup point for us. The zoning maps have helped with that, but that seems to be our hiccup that we're running into.
Thanks, Betty. I've heard multiple things about ECAP being a little bit tricky because of its restrictions and finding different ways to kind of utilize that. Stephanie and Betty, do you think you can talk a little bit more about the transition from preschool to kindergarten and what that looks like in your program?
Yeah, it's been really exciting to have our kindergarten and our preschool and TK programs all under the same roof. And so we've been working as a team. I know Missy and Allie, our other SPED coach, worked really hard to create a bank of IEP goals that are aligned to our TSG continuums and standards. I think it might be an artifact on the website. And so utilizing those, they are actually coaching both preschool and kindergarten and are case managing both levels. And it's really, really neat to be able to see student successes from last year. We were just celebrating this morning as a team about how you walk into the kindergarten room and some kiddos that maybe you would have noticed last year as having some more significant needs, it look like all the other kindergartners in that they're successful and they're able to access content and really are excelling in social emotional ways. So it's been really exciting to not only be on the same campus, but to strategically place staff in collaboration meetings weekly as coaches to bridge that gap. We also have an early learning coach that focuses on play-based centers, and she's been part of the inclusion team. And so she's able to bring that knowledge to kindergarten and to continue that play-based intentional learning into kindergarten. And it's been really fun to watch the program grow. We've also been able to wrap in our Migrant and EL Parent Advisory Council in our 100 Schools initiative. And we've been implementing arts integration and cultural events for family nights as a district. So celebrating culture and dual language as well, starting in preschool and TK for the first time this year, having a one-way dual language program. So that's also helped wrapping the family and the cultural components and just having our parents being able to lead the work. I think we were talking this morning as a team, it'd be great now to have parents start to share their successes about their kindergartners as they've gone through inclusion and be part of our planning team and really utilizing parent and student voice in planning for inclusion. So I think that's where we're headed in the horizon, which will also help our preschool to K transition. But lots of things, lots of little great fires in a good way being started this year that hopefully will spread for years to come.
Thank you, Stephanie. Molly says, as a parent, she appreciates including families in the planning. I do too. Based off of the conversation that we had about people, the topic of interest, one of my favorite areas with Robert Lince that Stephanie kind of talked about was the art grant, which I was a part of, and also their dual language program, which I think is amazing and shows a high level of respecting heritage and cultural differences as strengths, as well as giving children that running start that they need and trying to avoid those achievement gaps that happen when we're not addressing those kind of cultural needs. I would love if you guys could talk about the art grant program, because it is amazing, and the dual language program, which I also think is just as stellar as the art grant.
So we applied to the Washington State Arts Commission Arts Integration Creative Start Grant, and that really was focused on integrating arts into our early learning center and our content in the classroom. But that sort of sparked this idea of why not wrap and invite our whole district to these events. So we've had a series of art and culture events that were actually planned by our Parent Advisory Council, and we started with a music and culture night where we integrated STEM activities. We did a make and take. We sent home a bunch of materials for students to make their own instruments, and they had to engineer them. We actually went through our preschool SPED PLC with Kathy at ESD 105, where they learned about early learning STEM activities. And so we did a live lesson with a focus on language and literacy in the home. and kids got to engineer their own instruments and try to make them noisier. And that we had so much fun. They decorated their instruments with their own culture that our parents were like, let's keep going, let's do it again. And our Migrant Pack president said, we need to end the year with dancing. And while we hoped we could do it in person, this last week we had a dance and culture night where our parents and their families got together. They've been practicing for the entire month on a traditional dance from Michoacan, and we got to learn about the history of Michoacan. We had a special guest from the ESD, Mr. Donald Bender, who taught about the dance, the history of it, and led us in dancing from our living rooms. It was very, very fun. The kids got to make masks and sombreros for the dance, and we taught about oral language and storytelling at the end and how that helps with literacy. And so our final event is June 3rd. It's going to be a watercolor night. And I can actually put the link to our parent video in the chat if you'd like, so you guys can watch it. It's really cool to see our families really step up to teach us and honor culture in our district. And so that was amazing. For dual language, we've had a dual language program now for 6 years, and we're launching into middle school next year, but this was the first year we housed it here at the Early Learning Center. We have a one-way program in Spanish, and in our region, if not nearly all of our students who are learning English as a second language speak Spanish as their first language. So we're actually giving the kids a chance to learn in their first language, which is super important. And we're really seeing our achievement gaps close at a very young age. Because they're learning in their home language. And it's been so neat to see the growth happen, but not only that, but kids being validated and their culture and their language validated in the classroom from an early age. And just being able to connect with families as well has been huge. And so I cannot wait to see the fruits of this a few years down the road, where our kids are excelling and feeding into our traditional dual language 50-50 two-way program starting at kindergarten. So it's been amazing. So 80% of the day of the student's day is in Spanish, and 20% is focused on oral language development in English. So it's been really, really cool to watch. And like I say, can't wait for the future on that.
I'm going to jump in and answer Erica's questions because she had asked a question earlier about her interest being in moving from a fully self-contained program into an inclusion program, and then had some questions about our facility. So this year we have one campus that includes our kindergarten and preschool. They're two physical different buildings. So our preschool in an inclusion model operated out of the same building. And one of our biggest limitations is that we have centralized bathrooms instead of individual bathrooms in classrooms, which those of you that teach preschool know that presents a huge supervision barrier, right? Because we've all got to go to the bathroom at the same time, or if somebody has to go to the bathroom in the middle of class, now that takes a person out of your classroom. So we understand fully the challenges with what your physical structure can do in terms of your instructional focus. And it's just something that I think you have to accept and know that it's part of the day and plan around, and just know that it's going to eat up more time, right? And I think that as educators, we want to maximize using all of our time to do all of these things, but actually potty training and getting fluent on that has lots of benefits, and doing that with peers can be helpful too. So if we change our mind frame around how we look at this barrier, it can sometimes help us see what instructional opportunities live in that, and being able to walk down the hallway using all of the different social skills to manage that with a group of people, and waiting while other people are coming out of the bathroom and doing hand washing independently. All of those things are instructional, right? So that's one way, especially when you're looking at your most complex students with disabilities, is thinking about what is the instructional opportunity here, and how do I maximize that for that student, knowing where they're starting and where they need to move, right? And what are the kind of groupings that are in your classroom? So when you start bringing in more typical peers, however your district can support that, and maybe right now it's just bringing in a handful of tuition-based peers, right? And maybe it's not going to a full classroom size, because like if you blended with, or if you braided with ECAP, then you would have to bring it up to a larger size, right? Depending on how many spots you have. So maybe tuition is the most accessible. And even if you only had a handful of kids come in, that's going to provide more models for your students. Another entry point might be having, if you're a fully self-contained program and it's only students who qualify for special ed, could you bring in speech only kiddos? OT only kiddos, right? Because they're pretty much peer models, just happen to be on an IEP, right? Because that's one of the funny quirks about the state is when they're looking at inclusion numbers, they're looking at total number of IEPs, not what type of IEP. So that gets a little bit funny because I just always say this, our speech only kiddos are really like our peers. And so they can be a nice asset to a classroom. That might be an easy step for you without adding additional funding sources, but expanding the repertoire of skills in the students in your classroom. So whatever that small step is to bring in more kids, because the kids with significant disabilities thrive on routine, and they thrive on structure, and they also are good at modeling. So if you can get some peers in there that they can glob onto and mimic, you're going to start seeing a whole lot of other things come along that help move their skills. Missy, do you have any other thoughts on that with like how to start with blending, going from fully self-contained?
Well, that you kind of spoke to how we did it when I came here 5 years ago. It was kind of a reverse inclusion. So we had mostly special education students in my classroom, and then we had about 4, so it's about 10 to 4, right? So 10 special ed, 10 IEPs to 4 tuition. And that's where we really got to see all those great things that Betty was talking about. These are things that I knew were possible all of my years, but it hadn't quite moved to preschool yet. And so in setting our model up the way that it was kind of the foundation of, okay, this really works. This can happen. They can sit and do a circle time. Everybody sits and does a circle time. Everybody sits and does a table time, and those kinds of things. Because I think that is sometimes the hardest thing is remembering that the independence is what we're after. And so your preschool classrooms, even if they're self-contained, it's my personal belief, and I've seen great things come from this, but your self-contained classroom experience should be very similar to the experience that they're going to get in a kindergarten or a more blended preschool classroom, because that's the whole point, right? You want to teach them how to be a part of those experiences that they can then generalize and go into the bigger classrooms. And so, we did. I mean, it was a little messy for a while, but I think, once the kids understand the expectations, you're doing all the behavior management things, you're throwing out your visuals so that there's clear understanding of what's going to happen, what is happening. You're making it, you're targeting those movement opportunities. I mean, it can happen, and I think that that's exciting. And one of the things also I just want to share that I know it happens a lot. I've been there. It happens to me all the time. We have those moments of not believing their kids can get it, and I hate that I say that. Even sometimes I have those moments. But what I have learned over time is that when you set that expectation high, they do get there. They get there and they do it, and it turns out beautiful. So I think that's sometimes that mindset that, like Betty was talking about, we have to work through that. And that's part of the transition to kinder vision that we have too, is really helping the staff and the teachers reframe and reshape their idea of how do those kids learn, because that's sometimes what it is, right? And it stinks, but that's the way it is. And so really getting them to have high expectations for all their learners, getting a lot of our teachers to have high expectations of themselves, and building that confidence in themselves that they can meet the needs of all their students. So it surely isn't anything that's happened overnight, but something that we've been able to continue building on. At least my the last 5 years in the district, we've steadily been moving more towards inclusion. So it's been really exciting.
Rena just put in a question. Thank you, Missy. And I was going to chime in on this before I have to run to another meeting, but setting up upfront collaboration time and intentional planning time with whoever your learning support specialist is, the special education teacher or other coaches that can help think about the instructional design proactively is super important, both for making sure that we're keeping whatever our instructional targets are at the focus, which we're using TS Gold. And those progressions really help us see, because it also is a progression. So we can see where our kids that are struggling significantly are still on the progression. They're not off of it, right? So that's been really helpful for us. But then it also provides a space for us to come back to the positives, because I think in the flurry of things, especially when you're in the classroom in the moment, if it's not going as planned, it's hard to see the forest for the trees, right? And so you're in the moment thinking this is all going terrible, and having a dedicated space where you come back and somebody outside of your team can say, yeah, but remember when they were running out of the classroom every day? That's not happening. So yes, they weren't attending. However, they're in the room, right? And that's where we're at right now. And that's an extreme example, but it's helpful to have that other kind of place to help you make sure that you're having a balanced perspective, because we all have our own perspective that can get skewed at times.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you for that question too, Rena. Does anybody have any questions? Any other questions? Thank you, Betty. We have to go. Feel free to speak out if you don't want to put it in the chat, or use the chat and we can be your voice as well.
Hi. This question, because it's the time of year and really thinking about those kids transitioning to kindergarten, and I'm looking for, Stephanie, I think it was you that spoke of that, right? And it sounds like the transition it's a little bit atypical, if I'm understanding you right. Do all the kids, and I don't know the size of your district, sorry, I don't know SELA very well, but do any of them go to a more traditional K-5 elementary where it's kindergarten and there's a resource room, and any ability to talk about that, and especially in light of those kids who maybe are those 40 to 79% children who truly have a lot of needs, but we're trying to promote inclusion. They may be kids who a little while ago would have been recommended for an extensive program, but because of the move towards really honoring inclusion. So that's kind of where I'm wrapping my head around about how to be as supportive as I can. Any advice or help?
That's a really great question. SELA is pretty unique in the fact that we have one building for each level that all students go through. So we have our early learning center where all the preschool and kindergartners go to, and then a first and second grade building, 3 through 5, etc. So we don't have a traditional elementary setting. So it's very unique. The other thought is, we've kind of talked as a team and as a district, we want to err on including the student instead of not. So kind of going back to what Missy said of having those high expectations, pushing in support, and that sort of thing. We do still have a self-contained classroom that will be housed at the first and second grade building if there is a need, but Missy can speak a little bit perhaps to that decision-making process that we go through, but we do for sure, again, err on including first and then working our way backwards if we need to, depending on the best interest and environment for that student.
Yeah, so I was just going to add, you know, the thing that we have to remember is that it's a continuum, right? And then by definition, you know, inclusion, it's not just throwing a child in a classroom. That's not it. That's inclusion has so much more to do with those experiences that are intentional and happening while that child is in the classroom. So a lot of times, you know, a lot of what we will do is we will take a look at what skills does the student have, do what Stephanie said, err on the side. So we're going to say, okay, we know they can be successful with these skills. We know they can be successful with these things, but oh gosh, this might be a really great time to maybe have them come in as a smaller group, because maybe their, you know, academic learning pace is so dramatically different from what's happening in the classroom. And so maybe a small part of it, they come out. So I think that's been one of the barriers that we've had this year is kind of that understanding that it still needs to be a very individual conversation for each child, because truthfully, as I'm sure you know, all of you know, there are children who really, honestly, it's not in their best interest to function in a classroom with 15 other children and kind of this all day, right? So, so those are things you have to take into consideration. And then, you know, also making sure, you know, that you're still able to provide that specially designed instruction in the classroom, and also in maybe a space that is a little bit more geared towards what their learning style and what they're needing. So that's kind of, so this year we kind of threw the kids out there, and now what we're doing is we're kind of backing them up, and that's part of just kind of that learning process. That's part of trial and error. That's part of really taking a look at the kids and figuring out what, you know, individually do they need. And sometimes it doesn't always mean they're in their classroom all day for every single thing. So some of them are, but they don't have to be. So does that answer your question, Jerry?
It helps me get a picture of what you're doing. It's when a district is kind of in the early stages of making a move towards really trying to honor, you know, homeschool, LRE, and there maybe was more of a tradition or just a practice of, you know, wanting to, the concept that, oh, a specialized extensive program is so perfect and supportive, and that's what they need because it looks more like the preschool. So some districts aren't where you are. They're at more of a, all right, we're starting to make this change, and we're at that cultural moment of having everybody who's going to work with those kids really wrap their heads around, okay, how do we do this? The logistics, like that's, and so I look forward to looking on the materials that Cassie, I think, was saying, oh, she's going to email things out. I can't wait to read through all of that, but, and maybe even just making connections. I don't know if you guys have a psych you might connect me with, or, and I actually have lots of questions, and I don't want to just like talk over everybody, but can I keep talking? Is that okay?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Because that was helpful. The other thing, I really love hearing about the dual language program, and one of the things you said about the kids instructing in their home language and then growing. Do you guys, okay, then of course there's child find. There is just the churn and the mechanics of the law. Okay, you just have it. You got to do it. I think my kid has a disability, child find start timeline. That's my world as a site. I'm also trying to really honor the state, at least our ESD, Steve Gill, the matrix. You know what I'm talking about when I say that? Okay. Not everywhere, not everybody does, but having been steeped in it, also on the preschool level, there's not a lot of people who practice the matrix at the preschool level. And it's different. And is there a psych or somebody that I can talk to with you guys about that? I'd love to talk more sometime about preschool matrix.
Yes, we can absolutely set up a time to collaborate. We'd be so happy to do that and talk about, you know, placement decisions, incoming students. I can show you our funding model and how we reserve spots for child find and as students come in throughout the year. What we do for placement, we actually just started planning at our last leadership team about placement matrix decision maker, and also a staggered start to a full day. So slowly,
nice.
Yeah, it's very prototype just now on the cusp of getting something on paper, but like milestones for kids to be able to be successful in a full day and what that looks like with that end goal of full day kindergarten in mind, right? And so those are all things we'd be more than happy to schedule a specific time to talk and answer questions maybe that are more specific to your district.
Exactly. Because I don't want to, like, I know that there's a particular path for this meeting today, but I was showing up hoping to maybe make some connections. The preschool, there's not as many psychs doing stuff in preschool. And so I connect a lot with teachers and early learning directors and stuff like that more so, but yeah, thank you very much. Of
course. I put my email in the chat, so feel free to send me an email and we'll find a time to connect.
Great. I'm copying it right now. Thank you, Stephanie.
You bet. Awesome. Oh, yes. And Cassie put a plug in for another virtual visit. So that'd be a great way to connect with you all. So check that out in the chat.
And just to elaborate a little bit on that, this forum right here is more of an open house where multiple people are joining to get questions answered. The virtual visit is a little bit more structured with maybe a few people or one school, maybe two, talking about a specific topic. So Jerry, if you've got more questions that you have around certain topics, you go on, you fill out the form, which has placement for you to put all of your topics of interest, and then we can prepare artifacts, get the team ready to answer those questions and prepared. And then it's another hour-and-a-half long meeting where you just get one-on-one time with the team and really get to dive deep into some of those topics that you may be struggling with. So that link should get you straight to that virtual visit where you can click to fill out the form, and then we will match you up with your best fit in terms of our 4 preschool sites.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Awesome. Some good questions. I know we did a lot of learning together. So our first year, we were part of Pre-K Champions and did a book study with Kathy Linehan at ESD 105, which was really instrumental in us starting this work. We did something called the pre-mortem, where we, a former boss of mine taught this to me, but we basically imagined, what if we did inclusion and everything went wrong? What would it look like? And then how do we work backwards to make sure that doesn't happen? And we created an action plan, and then we created a graveyard where we laid to rest things out of our control. And I think Missy would agree, like it alleviated a lot of anxiety, and just hearing our concerns and knowing we had a plan to support them was huge for our team. And then also, as you mentioned, Jerry, like the inclusion work is a lot about mindset, right? Mindset matters. And so doing that work to learn about inclusion and how it goes beyond special education and building a culture of inclusivity is really important. So we adopted the book, The World Needs Who You Were Made to Be by Joanna Gaines, as it's a great book about kids that are building their own hot air balloon, and they have their own special culture, unique interests, needs, and how each one's different, but they're all beautiful. And so taking that concept and teaching it to our kids and instilling that in our staff as well, like, and that extends to our staff, that we need each staff member and their unique talents and experiences and perspective on the world as well. And so really there is a lot of culture work that goes into this. And so I'm happy you've mentioned that, because it really brought to mind those pieces that sometimes we forget about.
That inspired me to ask you if you could talk about, how do you get buy-in and include those important stakeholders, and what kind of supports does the district give you for these inclusionary journey? Because we all know that when we're thinking about where we don't have control, there's some areas where we don't have control, and we need the higher ups to be like, okay, I see this as an issue, like, let's address it. So how do you get that buy-in and how do you get that support?
We definitely had a lot of support from the local ESD, being part of Pre-K Champs, and also from just OSPI and DCYF. Don't be afraid to reach out to your ESD, to the agencies, to say, hey, I want to do this, because they're more than willing and supportive to help. There's also some grant programs that you can apply to help. And so that's helped us tremendously. Our district and their strategic plan included culturally responsive pedagogies and meeting the kids where they're at, and inclusion fits in with what we're trying to do as a district. So we started our MTSS process is now an MTSS inclusion leadership team that Betty started, because we've had pockets of great work at different buildings. But bridging that together, right, and dismantling those silos so that it's all a strategic vertical alignment for inclusion, so that we don't just have this fantastic inclusive program at preschool and then it goes away, but it continues as kids move older and they have those supports. So all of those pieces were kind of instrumental in buy-in, but for sure the pre-mortem, the team planning before it happens is super important, I think, for buy-in, because I think fear can get in the way of a lot of things, great things that we're trying to do. And part of that culture work is definitely communication and knowing and action planning and teaming with all of those concerns on the table and all of those ideas on the table, so we have clarity and around the vision we're trying to achieve as well. So I would say start with the vision. What do you dream about for your students? And then make a backwards map on how to get there and include all of those key players. And then think about the fear, think about what's lurking, and then how do you prevent it from happening? I think all of those steps are kind of key to getting the work started. And then be sure to include parents and kids. What do kids want? What are kids dreaming about? What are parents dreaming about? If you can do those things, that would be awesome.
Thank you, Stephanie. I always like to start off when we're doing explanations about focusing on what is great versus what is focusing on what is difficult. But I always like to recap and reflect on the things that were difficult, because it lets us know how far we've come. And it's just, we should normalize not making mistakes, because it happens and things are difficult, and being inclusive is very difficult, because at this juncture, it's more of a practice versus a staple, and that's what this work is for. We're trying to make it where it's not why is inclusion important, but inclusion is important. It is important, and we're trying to drop that why from that statement. So I would love to hear from Missy and Stephanie just on this inclusive journey, some barriers that you had to endure on the way, whether it's with parents or students or the district leaders, important stakeholders. Like, what were some barriers and moments of adversity that you had to overcome to get there? Because a lot of people that are joining us today are starting their journey, and it's difficult. And just like you said, fear stops us from a lot of achieving a lot of our goals, because we're scared to fail, and failing is a part of learning, right? So I would love to hear about some barriers overcome.
What do you think, Missy? What comes to mind when you think about what we've overcome?
Well, I think about, being a special education teacher, you just tend to think a scotch differently than perhaps, a kindergarten teacher. I think that's one of the biggest barriers we've had, is just kind of embracing that fear that the teachers have of, I don't know how to teach these kids. I don't know. I don't know how. And really trying to go into the classrooms and focus on the good things that they don't even realize are happening, that are meeting the needs of all of the kids. And I would say, gosh, you know, it really just is that fear part, and also that understanding that understanding and that knowledge that generally what works best for students with special needs, because when you've problem solved through it, you've broken it down in so many pieces, you've scaffolded things in so many pieces, that what works for children with special needs works for everyone. You know, so you're not, by embracing this and kind of diving into it, you're really going to have a bigger impact on your classroom as a whole, because of just some of the structural things and the intentional teaching things. It really has a bigger impact. And so helping teachers understand that it's not a here and a here, or a hers and an, or, you know, theirs and an ours, you know, it's really, what are these really solid high leverage practices that we can put in place in classrooms that will meet the needs we know of students with special needs, but that will also meet the needs of many of the other kids, because we're all very organizationally minded, right? And I think especially in the age of students that we work with, you can never assume that they know, right? You just can't, because a lot of times they haven't come with, you know, at least in our age level. So you have to assume that they don't know, and most of the time you're right. So it does everybody a little bit of good to make it as simple as possible, as clear as possible, as, you know, and that's just that's a piece of the learning that we've had to share with our teachers. And that's a piece of a barrier that we are still overcoming, is just understanding how important some of those practices are, and strategies, and belief, how important that belief is in your kids and yourself. So, and especially a year like this, right? Like, if ever a teacher had not belief in themselves, it's this year, because, you know, all it takes is a pandemic to make you feel like you don't know what you're doing. And so, you know, we kind of like, I don't know, like we kind of set ourselves up for a very, very big task this year, you know, moving forward with this, alongside a pandemic and all the changes to traditional education that we've ever known. But it's all worked out. It's all worked really well. And there are so many great things that have come out. So I think we're always going to have those, the fear barrier, you know, honestly, I do. I have fears sometimes, and then it's amazing. And, you know, you just have to put yourself back in check. That it's going to be okay.
It's true. And I feel like because of the pandemic, the silver linings were astronomical. Like, it gave us extra planning time to be able to get some of this work done, to choose priority standards, and to partner with parents for asynchronous instruction. So Missy did some work on like customizing our learning targets to meet the needs of the progression or range of learners in our classrooms virtually. We were able to send out live links and videos and reading. And then that work kind of translated into these visible learning maps where kids could track their progress in a really fun, creative way. And we were just celebrating this morning about how far our kids have come and how much they've grown. And kiddos with some specific needs have shown astronomical gains in the areas we've put a lot of focus on. There's a saying, what you focus on grows, right? And so the importance of looking at that positive thinking. And our teachers, I mean, if we were honest, they maybe thought the ideas might have been a little crazy. Like, that's a little much for are you crazy? That's a little much for a preschooler to do, right? And then, but lo and behold, they did it in I know my own children surprise me very much. And I think our kids surprise us too. And as Missy mentioned earlier, you know, we did I used to think activity this morning, but now I think after this journey. And for me, I used to think it would take years to close the gap for kids. And now I think it can happen in months. It can happen in a way shorter amount of time than we think. And I think that's the power of inclusion. That peer modeling is huge, and not only for our students with needs, but I mean, we all have needs. My own kiddos, my own son was a peer model, and the gains he made as in his ability to relate to others and to be helping others, the empathy, I mean, kids, it helped all students, not just our students with need. And so we all have needs, and I just think, why not? I was talking with a mom, and she was celebrating, you know, inclusion and how far her son had come. And we were saying, and she made a great point. She said, well, when we go to the grocery store, there's not a section for students that have, for people that have specific needs, and nor should there be, right? And so why do we do that in school? It doesn't make a ton of sense. So I'm happy about this work. I think it's about empowering kids and including everybody, and that's important. So I'm passionate about it, and I'm excited to see more people embark on this journey.
Thank you for sharing that. And something literally took the thought out of my mind. I was like, in my mind, I feel like all students have individualized needs. All students have, even gen ed or sped, they all have individual needs that they need on their own. It doesn't matter if they come in and they're observable or they're not. Every child has their own set of needs that they need. In the great words of Lince Camp, all means all, y'all. So that means we are addressing everyone that's involved, and that's huge because we're not all the same. We all have our own cultures, and we all approach things differently, and we all have our own experiences and trauma that makes learning and embracing different ideas difficult for us. But being aware of that and being respectful of that can speak in spades. Obviously, you know, from what I've witnessed from our preschool teams, and just, you guys do amazing. This is amazing work, and this is where it starts. It's the baby steps. But I also do appreciate you being very vulnerable about areas that are difficult and being able to take that fear and turn it into fuel, because sometimes, like, when it comes to that fear, you can go one way or the other. You can let it take you down, or you can address it. And it's one of those things that's going to keep this work pushing forward, is that we're taking those fears and we're taking that, like Missy was saying, we're being hopeful and we're believing, because teachers had to be, everybody's role got switched in the Zoom. The parents became the teachers, and the teachers had to become the parents to the parents to be teachers. And it was just difficult. And like I was saying in the chat, the fact that we were already dealing with this chaotic time and you still took on this task because you knew it was important and it needed to be done speaks about the character and the depth of importance that this is to you in spades. I feel so honored to have been a support system for you in all of this. It gives me hope for when I have children, and for my nieces and nephews and godchildren who are in school, that people are looking at being more culturally responsive and more inclusive, because we're 44 in the state and in the US, and that is not where we need to be. Everybody should be number one. And it starts with those little steps. And it also has a lot to do with a lot of self-awareness, where, you know, being able to embrace those fears and knowing where you're at, and whether you're supporting a grand narrative, like that fear was like, I don't think this kid can get it, is like supporting that grand narrative and then taking that step back and being like, okay, this is what my fear is. How do we get here? That, I think that backwards mapping is awesome. I would love to talk more about that. That is an amazing way of thinking about it. It's like, where's the issue, and go back to what the solution is versus trying to find the solution and not really addressing what the issue is. That's amazing. I love that approach as a solution. It's amazing. We're going to be closing soon, just as a heads up. I just want to open the floor for anybody who has any questions. If there's any comments you would like to give Robert Lince, any connections that need to be made, this is the time to do so.
Okay, I just want to share out that I had a little bit of an epiphany listening to you, Mo. So I heard Stephanie just say, why not, and then I started to think about the conversations with teachers and the barriers, all the things we've been talking about. And yes, you have to embrace and acknowledge the difficulties and say, yeah, it totally sucks, get it, we're in it, and this is hard, right? But my whole new motto is going to be, but what if? Which kind of goes to, the backwards, I don't think this kid can get here. Okay, but what if? Like, what if they can? What would we do what would we do at that point? So, we all want to have a crystal ball, right? Wouldn't that be so great to know, oh, well, yes, they can. So that's where we're headed. It's not that easy. It's not that easy. But what if it is? What if it's just a matter of identifying what we need to do to get where we need to go? So that's going to be my new thing. I'll be selling bumper stickers. I'm kidding. What if? Thank you. Sorry, I just needed to share that because I got inspired. Yeah.
I love that so much. And it's true, right? Like so many times, even on personal notes, what have we let fear stop us from? Like, is there a trip you've always wanted to go to, but you were a little bit afraid? It's like, what if that was the best trip of your life, right? I mean, the risks sometimes, the benefits of the risk outweigh anything else. And so go for it. Don't be afraid to chase after those dreams and dream big for kids. That's my motto.
I love that. I always say that being an educator means being okay with failure, like being okay with trying things and being like, that's not okay. And Stephanie, you saying like, what has fear stopped you from? Fear stopped me from exposing my artistic ability for years, and then being in quarantine for so long and being like, I can't scrub my walls one more time or I'm going to chew through the other side of the apartment. So I'm going to try to do something else. So, and that is big. I think fear lets us know that we care in that same sense. It's not just like, I can't do it. It's that I care if I can't do it. And that's where, when I became coaching, when I was a coach, I started to realize like failing. Oh, I love that. Kathy said failing forward. Amazing. Sell bumper stickers too, Kathy. Bumper stickers too. You and Missy are going to link up, get a Canva account and sell bookmarks and bumper stickers that say fail forward. I love that. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that. I will pay homage, but I'm going to use it. Yeah, that is amazing. And when I think about you, Missy, saying like, what if? It's like, okay, when I think of mistakes, in the beginning, it was like, I was so pessimistic when I didn't. I was such an overachiever at one point. It was like, I didn't work, this didn't work. I couldn't get this kid to do this. But then my mindset shifted. And that's why self-awareness and mindset is so important, that it was like, okay, this didn't work. So what else can I do? And so it's like, yours is but if, mine is what else? So that is like, what else can we do? Like, there's not one way. My mom's favorite line, and I don't know where she got it from, and it sounds a little crazy, but there's more than one way to skin a cat. She's always said that. And at first I was like, why are we skinning cats, Mom? But there's just one way of achieving things. There's not one way of achieving things. We are all pioneers. Like, we can look around and look at our buildings and our technology and things like that. Like, we are pioneers and we can do things. It might take a little bit of work, but just like you were saying, Missy, it's hard, but nothing worth having is easy.
Yeah, and I think it's our job as leaders to really work on that, empowering others to take risks and to be creative, because they have their own unique skill set, their own unique lens and thought process on the world. So I think our job in leading this work is empowering others to take those risks for kids, and to think outside of the box. It doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? We don't have to be all self-contained, or, if there's a menu of services that meets the unique needs of a student, why not? Let's think out of the box, not always the way we've done things traditionally. still within the scope of what we're allowed to do, but creatively finding what works for a student. And so I think it's important as leaders to understand those fears, and knowing that when you get those questions that feels like people are poking holes in things, like actually they're trying to wrestle with it. Maybe that's fear. Maybe they care a lot about what you're trying to do. And so reframing our mindset too, when we do come up with that, against that resistance, it's like, what is it that's getting in the way? Is it fear? And how do we empower others to overcome that fear together, right? With the solution oriented mindset and problem solving, where we do need each other and that positive interdependence to get it done. So thanks, Mo, because I think that's an important part of leadership for this work. And I appreciate you guys bringing that up, Missy and Mo.
Thank you, ladies. Once again, I cannot stress enough how awesome it is to work with you. And the journey has been amazing from start, and we're not even finished. I'm getting, I don't want to talk about it, but that's all right. Stephanie and Robert Lince is stuck with me. I'll just be emailing like, hey, how things going? Like, what's going on over there? But what I would love everybody to take from their inclusionary journey and to think about it is to be able to make mistakes and be okay with that, knowing that collaboration is a huge key point, and being self-aware is also a huge point in this too. But having that hope, like Missy said, having that hope and fighting the good fight, and even on those hard days where you're like, I can't do this, this is a lot. And then that one day where you see all that hard work pay off when a kid just exposes something that you taught them, and you're like, oh my God, those days in the hallway where you were throwing chairs at me were all worth it. But it's those moments that make all that hard work and all that chaos that we experience amazing. And for all the teachers and educators who are pushing forward and showing up to things like this, let me know that there is a shift in mindset in the schools, that we know that there needs to be a different way of addressing certain needs of all of our children. And that's important, because at one point this was not a key issue or a key topic of conversation, and now it is very, very prevalent, and people are showing up and showing out, and that warms my heart. That definitely fills my bucket, because it lets me know where everybody's mind is at this point, and I can appreciate that from all of you. If anybody has any last comments or questions to speak to the team, you have the floor. I am so open for that.
I'll just give a verbal thank you as well. I gave a written thank you, but really I've kind of been getting some emails from my director throughout the year. I have to be honest, this is the first moment, it's May, that I've had my nose above water. And so the connections are great, and I plan to try to reach in more. So I'm thinking you'll be hearing from me, okay?
Looking forward to it, Jerry. Thanks for being here. And thank you to our UW team for being awesome, for being great inclusion coaches and supporting us, encouraging us. It's meant a lot. And a shout out to Kathy Linehan. She's been with us every step of the way before we really delved into this new model. So thank you, Kathy, as well. We appreciate you.
It's amazing. I think we're on a good start to getting this done, and I just see us going up from here. I don't really see the downfall of it. I know it's going to be hard work, and it's going to be a lot of work trying to get more buy-in and figuring that out, but with a lot of diligence and elbow grease, we can get there. Cassie, you have anything you want to share or join? Any last comments? Oh.
No, I just want to say how hard this team has worked in such a short period of time, and the work that they've done has been incredible. They have worked so hard to not only take care of braiding that funding, but the work they've done in their classrooms and in their setting is phenomenal, and it stands out. So just take everything you can from them, because they are leaders in this across our region. So we really appreciate their efforts, and we're broadening it to go past preschool in your district.
Awesome. So once again, if you have any more information that you feel like you did not get, or you want to tap into some other things on the IPP demo sites website, we also have a lot of deep dives on inclusionary practices to give you some more ideas about some strategies that you might be able to implement in your program. There is a lot of good information in a lot of them, and they touch bases on a lot of practices. I highly encourage you to take a look at them. And then also, if you have any questions for the Robert Lince team, you can also contact them at their website as well. They are more than willing to share and continue this work, so feel free to reach out. And once again, thank you to all our partners and everybody who showed up today. I am so moved, bucket filled for the day. This is amazing. I appreciate the growth mindset and those who were participating and being active in the participation and asking questions, whether it be the chat or in person. We are just excited, and we have been working really hard, and everybody that is involved, whether it's your first step into inclusion or if you've been inclusive your entire time, it's totally fine. It's the small steps that get us there, and wanting to get more information and not knowing where to start, but asking for that help and being collaborative in it. That's how we start. Where if we want inclusion to be a thing, we also need to model it. And I feel like inclusion and collaboration are best friends. They go hand in hand, just like the Robert Lince logo. So that is what, absolutely, we need each other. Diversity is one of our hugest resources, and we need to see it as a strength versus a barrier, because it just provides us with that extra lens and different levels of perspective that's going to get us where we need to get. Awesome.
And then I just wanted to share out that with all of the registration emails, I'll send out just kind of a recap email of everything that we talked about. Hopefully there will be a link in there to this recording. I will make sure that we have access somewhere. It might be either on our website, or I'll give you the recording directly, as well as artifacts, and then ways to contact the UW team, as well as the Robert Lince team, and clock hours will be in there too. So information about that. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming. And this was such a great start to our open houses. How awesome. And I'm going to stop our recording now too.